So you just finished this fender and it's beautiful until you look a little closer and you've got bubbles. And today we're going to show you everything you need to know how to get rid of them. So before we get into bubbles, I want to be clear about there are actually about two types of bubbles. Number one is going to be a dry bubble. And basically what a dry bubble is air pockets. It's not actually wet. And when I say wet, it means that it has like a solution like water or even like your slip solution, which is usually soapy. So I'm going to show you how to identify some of those two things because you'll actually tackle both of them a little differently, just a little bit, but I think it's very important to recognize what kind of a bubble it is. First off, dry bubble will not dissipate over time. If you have a wet bubble and it's not that big and there's just a little bit moisture in there, like a slip solution or something like that, typically if you're a DIYer and you don't mind waiting, it will dissipate over time. When I say over time, you're talking 72 hours to a week or so, especially if you're out in the sun. However, an air pocket or a dry bubble will not dissipate over time. So you do actually have to make sure you get rid of that right off the bat. So we're gonna set aside the wet bubbles later, but I'm gonna show you how closely. Look at this. So if you look really closely, it's very flat. It's a little bit, I guess, like cloudy. But when you look closer, there's really nothing in there, right? Like don't push on it, but you can see right here, there's two air pockets right here, and it feels flat. Okay, and you can also look at it from an angle, it's very flat to the surface. That's usually what an air bubble is, or a dry bubble, right? On the other hand, the wet bubble looks kind of like this. And because we use a slip solution, which is a soapy solution, you can actually see the bubbles right here. It also has a little bit of halo around it on top of this, and this is where the moisture is currently sitting. When there's moisture and an area surrounding the area that's already adhered, you'll actually see a little bit of discoloration. But over time, once that moisture is out, it tends to typically, go back to the same color, right? So we got some wet bubbles right here. You can see I made like 3 different sizes. I made a really big one right here. I made a little smaller one, and then I made like a medium one right here. But you can all see these. I can touch it, and it kind of moves around with that bubble. So that's how you recognize between the two. So now that we know the two, let's go ahead and start with the dry bubble. So dry bubbles, the first off is you really don't want to just like deal with it in the sense like just push it with your finger right off the bat, because it's trapped and the surrounding areas have already adhered and adhesive has bonded. The air cannot really go anywhere else, right? It's a pretty thick film. It's usually an 8 mil thick film. So you really have to release it somehow, right? So there are a lot of ways. Some people use a knife like to poke it, but that to me seems dangerous. And typically we use like an insulin syringe for this dry. So you can get this really anywhere, Amazon, or I think you can get it at like CVS and stuff like that. Although they will ask you why. So typically I get it from Amazon. So here's the trick, guys. When you look at the insulin needle, it has an angle that goes like this, right? So it kind of goes like this. That's where you want it to go, and then you're gonna actually bend the thing around like 30, 40 degrees, right? Because I'm gonna now enter it from the side, because you don't actually wanna poke the actual paint, and when you poke the paint, you could potentially damage it. It is still a sharp object. So once you have the needle like this, you're just gonna go ahead and poke from the side, the base of it, and then you're gonna go in, and then you're gonna push with your thumb, and then you're gonna exit out. I know that was kind of hard to see, so I'll do it without me pushing. So there's a smaller one right here. I'm gonna go from the side. Oops. Like this, and then you're just gonna go out. It's kind of hard to show, really. But basically, like, that was a little smaller one, but you really wanna puncture from the side, and then you don't wanna like swoop up, you kind of just wanna go straight through, and you're gonna kind of be parallel a little bit to the paint. So you're puncturing the actual film and not the paint, right? And then once you get that puncture, you'll actually see it visually. Then you go from the opposite end of that bubble, right, the dry bubble, and as you push in, you're gonna exit out, right? So what you're doing is you're kind of grabbing all that air and then pushing it out into the exit way, which is the hole that you created. This is such a tiny little needle that you'll barely see it. So like, for example, like here was where I inserted a needle, right here. So like, you see this? I'm gonna try to circle it right here. And you can barely see it. And often too, you can actually use hot water or heat, and it'll also self-heal and it'll kind of work itself out. So that is how you typically deal with air pockets. When you see them and you know it's a dry bubble, make sure you take care of it right away instead of waiting, unlike the wet bubble. So now let's go ahead and transition to the wet bubbles. We have 3 of these and then we're done with this. So basically, when I look at a wet bubble, I try to identify it as 2 different types, right? One is you just finished, you looked at it, you inspected it, and within the first like 15 to 30 minutes, you've realized, shoot, I have a bubble. And I think when you do this, and you know, like right now in this video, like we talk to DIYers, we also talk to installers and stuff. And so I'm gonna kind of give you an advice that kind of encompasses both of them, but you have to kind of make the right decision in terms of what you want to do. So for example, if it's only been 15 to 30 minutes and it's like, if this is the edge, I know this is obviously not the edge, but if this is the exit edge and your bubble is right here and it's only been that much time, you could actually have time to get it out. The other thing that I'm going to say before you even do this is you cannot go to a tacked point. So for those of you who are learning, remember there's slip, which is usually a soapy solution, and then there's tack, usually distilled water and alcohol, or sometimes just straight up water. And if this area is tacked, you cannot go back to that, because when you actually push all that water out or the soapy solution out, it's gonna get trapped in the tacked area, because when you put tack solution, it aggressively holds down and you're basically blocking that area. So this area I actually didn't tack. You can actually see this film still has open area, and I'm assuming that this is it. So here's what you do if it's hasn't been that long. First of all, spray a lot of slip solution on the top layer. I like using a bowl like this for a lot of, the stuff I do, because it just keeps it nice and clean. All the debris is completely off. Make sure you have clean hands. Some people use gloves. I got clean hands. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna just hold and go just like that. I know it's fast, but you have to be very fast, right? So I can see that this got trapped a little bit, right? And when you do this, here's the tip: don't press in and then go up. You're actually gonna create a mark. So just kind of get ready, but I'm just kind of resting it. Spray a lot of slip solution, and I mean a lot, because you want to make sure it's lubricated. And you're just gonna go up, just like that. So if you look closely, I'm just gonna wipe this down and show you guys. All right, so here's a little bit of the risk that you're actually gonna face. When you do this, and it's been too long of a time period, there's gonna be areas around, like think about like around this area that has already dried and the adhesive has bonded. When you're trying to exit out, the reason why I say that 15-minute mark and it just hasn't been that long is it's still fresh. Like adhesive hasn't fully bonded. So when you do that, this technique that I just showed you is gonna be perfect, right? And that's why it's so important to actually inspect your work before you move on to the next panel. The worst thing is like coming back to it after you finish another panel and then realizing that you have a pretty big bubble there, right? So you do have the risk, if it's been too long, of having something called a snail trail. And basically what it is, it's a travel distance on those dry areas, and it'll create like a little snail trail, basically, right? So if it's been too long, just know that that's a risk. Only you will know. Like if you're like, it hasn't been that long, it literally just did it, then you can do this technique. So I'm gonna show you right here, just this area, I've tacked. I wanna show you what happens and what it looks like if you try to push it out from a tacked area, right? So this was aggressively tacked. You can see the surrounding areas I actually didn't. And I'm gonna do the same thing that I showed you above. Okay. So that looks okay, but look what happened right here. It got stuck. Do you see this little big bubble now? It didn't actually make it out. And the other factor is there's a big body line right here, and then it got stuck right here. So I'm gonna just try to keep exiting it out and just see what happens. So I'm going full blast, 2 hands. It does not move right now, right? So I might have to move it somewhere else in order to get this out, but you can see it is not moving at all. It is literally just staying there, and it does not escape that, right? And this is what we said earlier about you cannot go back to a tacked area. So if you have to, I guess I could try to, I've created this trail now and it's not really working very well, and instead I'm just gonna go ahead and collect it right here and show you another method later on. Okay, so you have no other options. You got that bubble right there, right? And then we also have a medium-sized bubble right here. I don't know if you see this. All right, so this is actually a pretty big bubble. I mean, this is right here, and then we got that bubble that wasn't escaping. So now, this is my go-to method, and I think a lot of PPFers usually have a syringe needle. It's a very, very similar technique that you do, like the dry that we showed you earlier. But what you want to do is on the base right here, I'm going to go ahead and angle it actually even more. And you could even suck it out. Okay, right now there's a little bit of a trail. I'm going to do the same thing. Just like that. So first off, it's a very, very small, like very, very similar technique, but basically if you have a bubble like this, you don't want to poke right there in the middle, right? I usually poke right at the base of it because I want it to exit out there, right? So if like this is the bubble, this is where my finger will be, this is where the hole will be. I typically do suck some of the air out of there, especially depending on what it is, and you could just kind of slowly do that, right? And then as I do it, I exit out because what will happen is you're going to push that water out. It's a small little area. You just don't want to go back to, like if there's a trail, like you don't want to put the bubble there, because if you try to do that and you exit it, what's going to happen, right? It's going to go back to that trail that it was, right? So that's actually what you don't want to do. You want to actually almost like corner it in a way that it can only go that direction. So what I did was my bubble was right here. I didn't push it downwards because I know there was a trail. I went kind of above it like here, and I pushed it away from that trail. We got one more opportunity right here. This is a pretty big bubble, I'm not gonna lie. And you can kind of see, right, I talked about a little bit of that trail. Okay, I'm gonna go up here, suck it out a little bit. Okay, so that's one. I got a lot of water out actually. Okay. Okay. It's getting smaller. Okay, so I got this, and then just kind of exit out. And there you go. So very, very same concept, right? So you're basically just poking a very small hole, right? And depending on the size of the bubble, some of them can be really big, so you might have to do a couple, but you try to minimize the amount of poke that you need to do. But you can also see right here, there's a little bit of that, where that water was. And I can kind of go back to where I showed you right here. There used to be a snail trail right here, right? That's gone now. this is actually dissipating as well. So kind of what I said, like, I think it was what, like 20 minutes since we installed this. So it wasn't a whole lot of time. But like I said, anything after that though, I mean, it also depends on the material you use. Some material just grab really, really aggressively. This one is Avery Dennison Supreme Defense PPF. And it has a decent workability in terms of how long you can kind of work with. So we made one more final bubble just for you because we want to show you one more one more technique. And basically some of the other ones that we used were, I guess, like medium size. This is a pretty big one. And if you notice, you can kind of see the halo right here that kind of goes around, all around here. It does bring the gravity, right? But I mean, right now, like, it's not really going anywhere. This is kind of where it is. And you can kind of play around with it a little bit. So one thing you could do as well is let it travel a little bit. You're gonna, again, poke from the side, right? So just like this. Okay? And what you're gonna do is go ahead and just okay. And you're gonna cut. You're gonna basically, this is a little bit harder, but you're gonna go ahead and push it out, all right, and then kind of continue to, look at all this water that came out. You saw that, all right? And basically what you're doing is as you're kind of pushing it, you're also pulling, right? So like, it's a little bit harder, but typically I think what a lot of people do is they kind of use their thumb. You don't need a whole lot, and then just kind of pull it up like this, right? I mean, once it's in, you could also just kind of use your pinky, or you could just kind of suck it out right off the bat. One thing is, once you do it, sometimes it does enter back in like this. It has like a recoil, so it might like push it back in, so be careful about that. But I think when you have a bigger bubble like this, that's kind of how you deal with it. It's really a one motion, and as you do it, you kind of suck out some of the air and some of that bubble, and this will hold a good amount of moisture. So if this video helped, let us know in the comments below. And if you have other questions about bubbles, we'd be happy to help. But it is a very easy technique. Once you master it, you'll get better at it. But those are how you remove bubbles from your PPF installation. This wraps Wrap Wednesday. We'll see you next time.